All right. Tonight we're going to talk about the business cycle and the circular flow of markets. In other words, how money works its way through, how everything is connected, and how when we look at that video that we saw today dealing with the credit crisis, how the actions of some people have major ramifications. And obviously then when you multiply that, how the actions of a lot of people with a lot of leverage can send absolute shockwaves through the market and through the economy. And so what we're going to do today is I'd like you to leave a little bit of space up above. You can either draw this or you can just write down what it is. On the left-hand side, we have households or consumers. These are people who are going to buy stuff. These are the demand, really, in most of the sense that we're talking about. And on the right hand, we have our producers. These are businesses. These are the people who are going to manufacture stuff and sell stuff. And so these people work together. And what we see is businesses and producers are going to give goods and services to households. So think about this in terms of Best Buy. I go to Best Buy to buy a laptop. And so that's what they do. Best Buy produces a good for me. They produce a laptop. Actually, they're just a middleman, but you get the point. They don't do this for free. In turn, I have to give them money. This is called the product market because I guess the easiest way for you to remember this, I would say, is because we buy products in the product market. You as a consumer purchase products from businesses. You give them money. They give you goods and services. Well, that's only half the equation. The other half is this. You are going to sell something to businesses. And what is it that you sell? What is it you as a household sell to businesses? Well, hopefully you understood it's labor, your factors of production. Whether it's your entrepreneurship, whether it's your technology, typically we quantify it, I think, easiest for you to understand as labor. Now, you're not going to just go work for a business for free. You're going to expect them to give you money. Again, we see simply time is what we're doing. This is called the factor market. Again, factors of production. Money is being exchanged for factors of production on the top. Products are being exchanged for money in the product market on the bottom. And we see that this is circular. Literally, money starts at businesses, goes to consumers, and ends up back at businesses. Maybe not the same business, but the same sector. What we're looking at is all of the businesses and all of the households. And so what we're seeing is the money that starts at Best Buy pays me to go work as a computer geek for them. I'm not making fun of geeks. I'm saying Geek Squad. Okay, I'm making fun a little bit. And then I take that money and I go buy an iPad because I like stuff. At the same time, factors of production and goods and services are being exchanged. I give my labor to the business and then they give me their goods and services. And we see that combined, everything is circular. The money goes around and they provide their labor to me in the form of goods and services. This makes a cycle. So what I'd want you to do is to draw on the right-hand side. Don't worry about writing all this stuff. Just draw the wavy line up and down over a horizontal line that is trending up. Think about it like a bad supply line. Okay? And I wouldn't write anything down besides the line. Okay? Now, this is not a price and quantity. You can see this is how much we're producing, and this is time. So over time, we're seeing a trend. All right. What we have to understand is this. Business is never staying the same. Never. It is always changing. Second to second, minute to minute. For all you know, Apple is dead. They just don't know it. For all you know, Microsoft is coming out with a new phone, teaming with Nokia, and they're going to completely put out of business Apple. I'll tell you this, 3 years ago I got my first BlackBerry. I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Now, Research in Motion, the company that makes BlackBerries, is dead. Again, a zombie company, unless they figure something out. Business is never staying the same. There are 4 stages, and I would draw the arrows next to this as well. So here's what we see is expansion. This is when the economy is growing. We see next the peak, the top of the mountain. A recession or contraction, right? Contraction next to this as well. A recession or contraction. This is where things go down. And lastly, a recovery, which is what we're being told we're in. And for some people, it is a recovery. For some people, it's not. Again, during the Great Recession, if that's what we're going to call it. I hate that name, but it is what it is. During the Great Recession, some people were doing great. For the first 2 years of the Great Recession, I was doing incredible because my wife was doing just fine. She still had her job. We still hadn't had Charlie. what we want over time is this. So draw this arrow. Over time, the key is, in this business cycle, this series of peaks and troughs, we want growth. In other words, yes, it's going to change. It's going to have ups and downs, but over time, things are going to increase and get better. What I want to do then is break this down using a company that we're all familiar with, which is Apple and their iPods. And so leave a little bit of space as you do this. Don't worry about drawing pictures. Worry about drawing arrows and writing what we put down. We could start this whole cycle of the business dealing with Apple's iPod. This saved the company. Apple was nothing before the iPod. It was great in the 80s and then dead. Now, what we see is Apple comes out with the iPod, the first generation one, and this is what it looked like. Ugh, terrible. Just ugly, but at the time you're like, wow, this is cool. I can store all of my music on there. And so what we see is this. People rush out to buy one. They're like, this is amazing. Instead of carrying CDs around, I remember I used to have something the size of a laptop that had 100 CDs in it. That way I could have all of my music with me at a time, and I thought it was awesome because I had a CD player in my car. Still way better than having tapes or just listening to the radio. And then when they came out with this, you could see a substantial increase in the quality of a product for a simple thing, delivery of music. That's all the iPod did, is revolutionized how they deliver music. Well, sales of iPods naturally increase. This is our period of expansion. So what we want to understand is what happens for Apple and for profits and for workers during a period of expansion. Well, the first is that it's a period of growth in the economy. What does this mean for Apple? They make more profits. Obviously, they're selling more stuff. As they sell each unit, assuming that they make a profit on each unit, the more units sold equals the more profit. Well, what are they going to do with their company? They're going to hire more workers. Why? Because they need to make more iPods. They need to assemble more. They need to ship more. They need to package more. They need to hire more salespeople, hire more truck drivers. All of these things. So they hire a bunch of workers. All right. It's a year later. Apple has their iPod out. Almost everyone who wants an iPod has one. We have to remember that there's always those people who cannot afford one. So you say, okay, almost everyone who wants an iPod has one. What happens to the sales of iPods then? Well, they increase and stop. They hit this peak. The hard part about a peak is this. We don't know we've hit it until afterwards. Why? Because Apple is pumping out iPod after iPod after iPod. And so they think every month they're getting orders from companies. Hey, you need to get more. You need to get more. I need more. I can't keep them on the shelves. When my wife bought me my first iPod, I remember she went in at Christmas and she was standing at the counter and somebody goes, we only have one black one left. And she's like, I'll take it. And I was very happy at Christmas because I got an iPod and I'm a dork. Now, this is categorized then as the period of the most economic activity. The peak is the period of the most economic activity. Apple's profits are at their highest because they are selling the most units. In addition, Apple has the most employees. Why? Because again, they're selling the most units. They need to produce the most. Everything's rosy. Everything's sunny. The stock prices are high. Everyone's flush. Everyone thinks this is wonderful. This is great. All right. It's a year and a half later. And the iPod is out. All right. Everyone who wants and can afford an iPod has one. So all of a sudden, the number of people going to Best Buy and Target and Walmart to buy an iPod slows down. And this month, it's worse than last month. And the problem for companies is they go, well, maybe it's just because it's January, and sales are always lower in January. But then February comes, and the numbers are lower again. And then March, and then April. And sales keep going down. This is called a recession or contraction. Now, we're talking about a single item, a single product within the economy. When we talk about a full-blown recession, we're talking about the whole economy is contracting. In other words, more companies are experiencing a decrease than are experiencing an increase. This is a period of decline in the economy. People don't want the product, or they already have one, or it's still too expensive. And so Apple starts losing money. If nothing else, they're making less profit than they did before. And the first thing Apple has to do is fire workers. And now here's what you have to understand. They don't fire salesmen. They don't fire engineers and designers. They don't fire the people at the top. They fire the assembly workers. Why? Because the last thing they need is more iPods. Because inventory is building up. They've got more and more iPods out there. And so they're sitting in their warehouse, and they're sitting in store shelves, and they're sitting in storage rooms at Best Buy, and then they're sitting all over the place. And what we're seeing is, hey, we have too many iPods. So they get rid of the baseline workers. They get rid of the assembly workers. They get rid of the truck drivers. And so the people with the lowest skills get let go first. And this happens all over the economy. Why? Because to make more iPods is the exact opposite thing they need to do. All right, things aren't looking good. It's 2 years later, but this is what Apple is brilliant about, is they go, we need to introduce a new product. So obviously I skipped some stages here to simplify things, but they introduced the iPod Touch. And people who like their iPod go, wow, look at this thing. Are you kidding me? This thing is so much better than what I have. I want one of these. And so sales of iPods increase. They recover. And so this is what Apple has been brilliant about, is that every year, like clockwork, we know what's coming out. We know this fall there will be an iPhone 5. We know next spring there will be an iPad 4 or whatever the heck they're going to call it. At some point, we see that iPod figured out how to get rid of the troughs and the peaks. They know that people will buy. And then what happens is they keep the old products around and start selling them cheap. Mr. Corkish, who refuses to spend money, which is a good thing. It's not a negative thing. He doesn't like spending money. He just got an iPhone. Why? Because everyone around him was raving about them, how great it was. But he's like, I'm not spending $200. So he didn't have to. He got an iPhone 3. Well, it's 2 generations older than the 4S, but it was free. So now he has one. So his sales, Apple's sales of older models start increasing because they capture this market for the people that wouldn't pay at the higher price or couldn't pay at the higher price. So what's a recovery? It's the period after the lowest point of a recession. Here's what we know again. You don't know you're in a recovery until you're already in it. You don't know the recession is over until it's ended. Why? Because it's looking backwards and saying, oh, all of a sudden August we're selling more than we did in July. September, October, November, all of a sudden we see we're increasing sales every month. So what is Apple doing? They're earning profits again. And because they're making something new, they begin to rehire workers. So here's the scary thing for low-level employees, low-skill employees. And this is what I hammer you guys about all the time. You need to find valuable skills, because at the bottom, if you're a painter and it's the housing market, when it expands, you're happy because you have a job. And so that's great. So you go out and you buy a house and you buy a car and you start racking up debt because you're like, the good times never end. Good times always end. There's a marriage joke in there, but I'm not going to make it. We hit our peak and then we go into contraction and then you don't have a job. And the problem is, if you don't save for the periods of contraction, you are never going to be able to handle it. And your standard of living has to go down, and you lose your house and your cars and your mortgage and you're bankrupt. And then when the period of expansion happens again, your credit is trashed and you can't do stuff. So what we see is this cycle of expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. But what we're hoping is that the growth overall is upwards. All right. Have a good night.